As you probably already know, I've been occupied for many years understanding why every single person who claims to be my friend, every scholar I've met, every social worker who I have known or turned to, sees me as held rightfully in an experiment of isolation as a deaf man, where cruel ideas about me are promulgated by people who know that they're spreading pathological lies. And the proof of this is in the exception, who's Deaf Jeannie. She's legally a child, but she's wise enough and present enough to know Pittsburgh for the liars they are and has said so. There's a bandwagon effect when liars are high and mighty enough, like George Bush and Robert Fripp, and the dacoits around Bowie and in the Dakota. Well, never mind all that. The reason I say never mind all that is that, oh, there's not really anything I can do about it. But if you hold on a minute, I have to find something. I thought I got my media worked out here because I wanted to try to give another take on the difficulties I've been having, not so much presenting a segment of the evidence regarding what happened, but being able to integrate them into the historic tapestry that I'm working on. And some of these points have been belabored enough that keeping them in context of newly discovered information is draining on the newly discovered information because the material isn't new. In other words, I have to belabor some old points to bring it into context. But the reason for this should be clear. I didn't understand where in the world this came from. I know it has Reagan sitting under the U.S. over the swastika. There's a bust of Hitler in the swastika, and there's Sarah Flynn, lived in Laurel Canyon with Houdini, and rather us is like Lazarus. Lazarus and Houdini have the sort of overtones I don't like when I'm worried about a pattern with someone named Casper. Casper, Lazarus back from the dead, Houdini. I don't like this. I don't like the poetry of those symbolisms. The choice of words bothers me. And of course, I did some work that the deans of the college wanted me to clarify for them because they felt that there was trouble brewing about my work. I would think that people would be curious to understand the pattern of men saying they think we're dead, but we let them escape. And the way it loops around to come back and appear as a mechanical adventure in Dealey Plaza taking out JFK. Naturally, I would wonder, where in the world does this come from? And I looked into the Cubist cosmopolitanism, theories of the fourth dimension that influenced Italian futurism in cinema in the age of Mussolini. Disney was around, so this idea of the great dictators in a magical kingdom of media coalesced. And I discovered, as you know, a game of two virgins, war game of two virgins, clock to the plague. And you have this idea of the world within, the musical realm as a force of creation. And script being sort of a talisman of this cult of two virgins that the postal union participated in. My father may have been in the CIA. I found my name under 1984 on that old movie. On top of 1984, and my Social Security card begins 1984. So I wondered, what's the script? Script makes diabolical pornography. So pornography is the demon. And so having any kind of sexual desire is implicitly rape. It's pretty heavy even for penis envy. But what we find is that they scripted the whole thing. They were a pornographic agency. We know that they were the Neva Pornographic Agency because Dee Dee's sister was named Neva, and it's Dee Dee Mancine, like Manson Cinema. So we know that the Neva Corporation. So if you go back to the beginning of theory about cinema, you find Henry Bergson. Henry Bergson was a man who talks a good deal about in creative evolution, about the mechanical properties of art and the effect on biology. So the idea of making biology into art is clearly a factor in the way they dramatized two virgins with a real world Pink Floyd The Wall named Leslie Katz, who had me weeping like Othello over her unrequited virginity. And they played this game of clocking Lenin's Houdini. Now, where does it come from, this idea for a Houdini? I've been going into this. It comes from this fourth dimensional psychology that's getting to Brian Eno's developing artificial intelligence. All through the AIDS attack, you had these things like, the perfect storm coming out in grocery stores while the oil fields were burning. They were doing like this magical dictator trip of the invisible hidden hand, Blysenders, which means blaze from the cinders, only has one arm. And the poachers who gave me Parkinson's say that they're doing it to cleanse me of a guilt of abortions that they paid for and sponsored. They were subjecting the persona to successive degradations of the X motive, and I was not in a position to resist. They had chosen to dehumanize me and make me into a golem. And they knocked me out using a nerve agent. This isn't theology or religion. This is some sort of espionage drama club from the fascists. And of course, I know who some of them are. Gail Burstyn and Greg Carl were two of them who wrote tracts about it. Now, I realize that some of them believe that the world is inevitably ash. Carl wrote a poem called World of Ash. They believe in the death culture. And someone I read from the National Review accused a Russian scholar of being in that cult. I'm not saying it would really surprise me. I just have never heard him say anything that was that far unhinged. But what do we get for ignoring the basics? I mean, surely it's not Russia. At least it's not Russia alone. It's Russia and Britain who are saying that we should castrate an American poet as penance for Hiroshima after murdering JFK. Oh, they're the ones who are validating sending in Neva pornographic to an elementary school, violently invading them and taking children hostage. They're the ones who are advocating it, the British. They used social media to scam up the idea that I deserve to be tortured to death because I wasn't a child soldier. And their definition of a child soldier is someone who celebrates being liberated from Fulton Elementary by a brutal, violent, pedophile corporation of gangsters, pornographic gangsters. And then they say, oh, well, you looky at adult regulated cinema sometimes because I've been isolated. It's not like there are no pleasures of the flesh that are shared with people you like or can imagine being with. These people abhor regulations. And it's some sort of bizarre and sinister ideological talking box talking in tongues while saying simultaneously sex is wrong, sin is wrong, while funding the invasion of an elementary school to take a child hostage and torture them sexually. It's a child. And the fucking pigs around Jay Inslee actually have the nerve to imply that I'm a pedo. The nerve. It's mayhem. And it doesn't look to me like anything other than cahoots across the board. And they're just now and then making a martyr to keep people confused as to what they're doing. I mean, if you can make believe that that's not happening by making people think something else is, then just about anybody is expendable. And I do not mean to imply that John Lennon was really killed by his friends. I don't think he was. It looks very sincerely like a Houdini. If you go through the webbing of the situation, you find a lookalike in 1966 of a Mothra film in which the woman who starred, the Japanese woman who starred in You Only Live Twice with Sean Connery, stars and dresses like you in a girl outfit, reminiscent of Yoko Ono's, who arrived soon after with John Lennon. These lookalikes were in place in cinema already. There's an overlap between The Killers, starring Ronald Reagan, and what they did in Dealey Plaza. There's an overlap. Overlaps. So, well, I have never seen, I mean, Alexander Dickens seems to me to be sort of mixing theology and philosophy and Russian culture to come up with something. I certainly do not approve of what has happened in Ukraine. come up with something that he has engaged in many academic niceties with the West about. I don't see any problem with that. I don't see him as a boiling mad lunatic. But it's possible, I suppose, that he's in on this nightmarish gig. Whoever that did it doesn't think that the mortal life is more important than the eternal life. And what the Groovies in West Coast did, who set up the whole thing, and just talk squawk, well, this lie, that lie, this lie, that lie, now tell us which lie you're on, was neglect to warn or tell or try to protect anybody. Because they had like a fall guy, a bagman, a golem that they could blame and make money off of and say, see, you believe in God, so why shouldn't you be burned to death? Which is criminally insane. And Richard Starkey strokes his foaming beard, having God tickle tortured all of these people who have AIDS and made them feel so neat because he likes them. He calls me a coward for wanting to be left out of this gargantuanism, this obscene gargantuanism. My name Crary in 1984, the old movie in 1984, and then my Social Security number 1984. These are people who they say, if you, the National Review is guilty of saying that people who flee reality and live in doom is nigh, terrors about ecology, for example, are the ones who oppose military and industry and wasting, throwing money at the nuclear bombs. And they can't, these evil pinheads at places like the National Review can't see how psychotic their position is, that they don't see that their whole idea of life, their whole joie de vivre, their whole reason to be, their whole staking a claim to the world rests on what tax and spend waste for nothing but a worship of death and destruction embodied in these nuclear bombs. As though they're not the ones who are out on the streets with men in long beards and signs saying doom is nigh, doom is nigh. So that's not what they're doing. And they dare you to try to make sense of them. And the reason is because if you do make sense of anything, they pin you to the position and say, therefore, we get to interfere and impinge on your persona because you have staked a claim to a position. How dare you? So I have no way of knowing what any of these people really are or what any of them really think. I don't have the time or the fortitude to invest in it. I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to marry any of the little girls who I like. Camilla Valieva, Greta Thunberg, Ying Hua, none of these people, I like them all. They're great. They're wonderful. I respect them. They're amazing people. But these stinking argumenters from a Hollywood squawking box torture me. Help the people who torture me, blame me. Gave me Parkinson's and want to see me sit there poking me with these stupid challenges. While nobody responds, not one single person who has claimed to be my friend has even bothered to notice that this is happening. Not one of them.